and Nick, thank you so much for joining me today and joining us at SWOOP Chat online. Jeff and Nick, I wonder whether you could start by just telling me a little bit about your Yammer journey, where it started, why you implemented Yammer, and then we could maybe move to, I know recently you've adopted Teams, and I guess you've had an exponential rollout of Teams with the COVID-19 working from home environment. So I'd just love to hear your journey, just so others can hear and learn from you guys.
Well, certainly. We started our enterprise social network actually 10 years ago this week. We just posted last night a happy birthday message to our internal network called Buzz. But we migrated to the Yammer platform last summer. We're in the middle of rolling out all the O365 suite of products. And Yammer was actually the first one of them all to roll out to the enterprise at Humana for us. And it's going really well. The last couple of months have been record-breaking months thanks to the coronavirus and all that's happening there. The coronavirus group that Nick manages had over 400,000 messages read in the month of March, which was a crazy high number, and I think about 2.3 million messages read for the month, which just was an all-time high by far for us. So it's going well, and is really serving an important purpose. It always has. We've always had good fortune with Buzz, but in this particular environment, with everyone being work at home, then we definitely saw a spike in activity there, and I think that will continue. One of the things that we're working on, for example, right now, our CEO has just been tremendous, and the whole senior leadership team has been wonderful during this, and how they have communicated with people, and the tone and the informality of messages, and the personableness, humanness of the content of those messages. But they have been through email, and
through email,
through live video conferences that are set up for leaders, not for the entire organization. And so, that's a perfect opportunity to say people are loving this form of communication, and they want these kinds of messages, and contact to continue. Now let's get it on the right platform for that, so we can have, the right engagement and the conversations about things that aren't the more one-way approach of emails there. So that's where we are right now with Yammer, and have an excellent hope for the future of it growing here.
So can I just jump in there, Jeff? So when you're saying that the leaders are having this great communication, it's still on email rather than on Yammer at this stage, even during the COVID-19 work from home environment?
Yes, it is. I mean, there are two primary ways of communicating have been through video conference calls that have been set up weekly or perhaps every other week with other leaders in the organization. And there are about 5,000 or 6,000 people leaders at the company, so it's a pretty large call as it is. But then his all associate email from the CEO has gone out weekly. And it's been, he's had pictures of his dog and his family and telling stories and fun stuff, and, content that would just do so very well on the Yammer network. Yeah. And we've been talking about having a new CEO connection group, or whatever we might call it there, anyway, for a few months. But this seemed like the perfect opportunity to say, okay, here's a particular instance of a type of communication that is just made for an enterprise social network. So let's move in that direction. And so we seem to be finally doing that here in the weeks to come.
So Nick, obviously there still is a lot of engagement around COVID-19 and all the issues surrounding that that's happening on Yammer if you're getting almost 500,000 messages.
Yeah, that definitely has been a huge impact on just overall volume of use, whether it's messages read, original comments, replies, likes, all that's gone up since coronavirus took hold. However, I see it as a great opportunity to showcase features of Yammer to people who weren't probably using it prior to going work at home and the increase in digital communication that we're all doing right now. So yeah, it's proven to be effective for people to stay connected, but it's also proven to be a great place for information to be shared. We were a very important part of the strategy early on when we mobilized to go work at home, when Humana made big decisions about how we were going to take care of our members, how we were going to take care of our associates. And then when that would be changing day to day, Yammer was the place where those announcements were generally happening and where the questions were asked. And I think where a lot of feedback was received about how we were handling things. And I know there were adjustments made to things based on what was read out there. And all in all, I think all the best capabilities and features of a community like Yammer have been on display on the forefront right now. And we're utilizing and seeing how great it actually is.
Great. Now, I've heard, obviously, especially in times of crisis, like a lot of companies find their Yammer networks become that place where you feel really connected, but also it creates this sort of sense of pride of what you're doing, especially, I guess, in an industry like you guys. So actually, I didn't explain that earlier. You're a private health insurer based in the US. And can you tell me, Jeff, the number of employees you have on your Yammer network?
We have 43,000 employees plus another 24,000 contractors.
Wow, so that's a big network. You guys are at the front line when it comes to health and COVID-19 issues as well. So how have you seen that sort of culture start to emerge on Yammer?
Well, one of the things, and Nick can share some particular stories of interest, but Nick and I are both on the corporate communications team. And so one of the things that we want to be able to gather from whatever that source may be, internal, external, et cetera, are the stories, of what's happening. Yeah. How are people helping the members that we serve? How are people helping associates? How are we helping providers, doctors' offices, et cetera, everybody who might be impacted in any way by this. And so we've asked them to share their stories, and they have shared so many wonderful, incredible stories that, of course, we gather and pass up the chain there to senior leaders. Right out of the gate, Nick posted in that particular group a request for stories and just asked people to use the Combat COVID hashtag for that. And we're still getting some in. And so it's been encouraging for people to see that, uplifting for people to see. People are eager to want to do whatever they can, making face masks or serving in their communities, helping go get groceries for elderly who shouldn't be out and risking, being near other people, et cetera. So just a lot of stories of that nature that continue to be shared in the network.
I should add on top of this all that a lot of these stories that are being sourced through Yammer are being used throughout the enterprise, whether it's internal communications to all of our associates, social media posts, to blogs and whatnot being put out by our leaders. For example, our CEO posted a blog, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. He's been doing it every Thursday, and I start reading through. I'm like, that's a story that I forwarded on to our people. I'm like, that's really cool. I help bring that to the public. And so there's a sense of pride in what we're doing too, because we're helping get this really great stuff out there for people to see. We're more than just a healthcare insurer. We're a whole wellness company and so on.
Nick and Jeff, you said, so this was summer last year. So around July last year, you implemented Yammer. And Teams came in right at March. Is that correct?
We did launch Teams to the enterprise in November of last year, and it has not been an automatic rollout to everyone. It has been on an opt-in basis so far, but we still have nearly 40,000 people who have opted into it at this point.
Was that sped up when you said it was initially quite an opt-in rollout? Was that sped up in March when everybody moved to working from home?
Well, it did. We saw a nice little spike right there that third week of March or so. I think it was around March 11th or 12th or something when they said, okay, everybody work from home here until further notice. And so we did see a nice little spike there in activity, both on the Teams side and the numbers, as I've shared, have been higher than ever on the Buzz side of the house. We had a strong work at home group already within Yammer, but the numbers for that group just skyrocketed big time after the change. I shouldn't say it was very active before. It existed, it was consistent, but it wasn't an exemplary group in terms of engagement. That has changed dramatically since the work at home time. Humana had, prior to this, we already had about 36% of our population who were work at home all the time anyway, out of those 43,000 people.
Wow.
But the others some might occasionally work from home. I would do so maybe 1 or 2 days a week. And so it took a big change in some habits to get everybody set up for that and get the equipment for it if they didn't have that to work from home. But we've definitely been using the tools in the O365 suite there to help with the transition since then.
And Nick and Jeff, are you able to measure some of these campaigns? Especially Nick, you were talking about the hashtag, I think it was COVID-19 or coronavirus. Are you measuring those with SWOOP along the way?
We're able to narrow down locations in the community where certain things were going on, and that's what helped us hone in on where those stories were coming from. Like our Humana at Home team, they have a group on the community within Yammer, and using those hashtags and SWOOP allowed us to find, we have a lot of them coming up in this group. Let's start talking to their leaders to see if they can help us get these stories out of people and help them encourage and influence. So using SWOOP led us to a path where we're getting really great content based on real life situations.
Oh, that's fantastic.
The key topics we use, and we see probably 3 or 4 different COVID-related hashtags in the top 10 for the last 3 months. The volume compared to the other active groups in Yammer, the coronavirus group stood up the second week of March, but for the full past 3 months, even including a month before the group existed, it's still number 3, in activity out of 1,200 groups that we have. And if we probably collapsed that time frame a little bit to look at just the time the group has existed, it would be number 1 or number 2 for sure.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and
wow.
we have so many teams within Humana that there's probably a couple thousand at least. Just the way we're structured, like 3 people working together could be considered a team in the directory. So I think that'll kind of it just makes the numbers a little harder to track and get any real solid impact because there's just so many of them.
Yeah, last time I looked, it was probably a year and a half ago, and at that time we had nearly 1,100 departments in the organization. So a lot of the spread out folks there across various departments.
Well, that actually leads me then to teams and governance. Like, how do you manage that many teams on Microsoft Teams?
Well, again, since it's kind of been a bottom-up opt-in process so far, it's grown at a reasonable pace, but at a pace that hasn't been dictated from above. And I think people have stood up teams because they wanted them, and channels because they perceived a need for them. And I'm not aware of many of those just being forced structures and unused teams just set up because this is how we're organized hierarchically. So I think that piece of it has worked well so far.
Jeff, earlier you touched on, you're hoping that, well, at the moment, the CEO and the other leaders are having these great stories and great communication, but it's via email. How are you going to move them and encourage them to do it on Yammer? Because I guess the advantage of Yammer is going to be that people can then respond to those messages and interact.
Right. Yeah. Well, we do have some leaders who do it really, really well. And I do track in SWOOP. I have a separate individual benchmarking list I keep for the CEO and all the people that report directly to him. So I'd take a glance at that daily. But we have some stellar top leaders like our chief nursing officer, a segment president, our chief HR officer, and a person in the law office even is in that group. And so several do it really well, and we use those as examples. We praise them publicly for that. We have annual Buzz Awards that we give out and for various things, and a Hive 5 Leader Award is one of those. And so those are always called out as good examples to follow. And I think most of the leaders will be open to that, including our CEO. It's not like he's never posted there before. He has off and on for 8 years, but it's not been a regular thing. And I think the twist this time is to say you've latched onto something that's being so well received, spoken of so positively already on Buzz, because people get the email, then they'll go to Buzz to talk about it. And so I think he'll be very open to that. It's just a matter of the mechanics of all the stakeholders from the different offices involved with communications agreeing on who does what related to it. And we'll do any kind of hand holding that we need to do. We'll sit with any leader and show them the process. We're not asking for a change in their lifestyle or a mass quantity of time. We're saying if a person did this for 5 to 10 minutes a week, it could make such a huge difference. Maybe 1 week is that kind of update post like he's been sending via email. Maybe 1 week it's a question to the people. 1 week it's a photo of his dog Chip and a story. It doesn't matter the content so much as the regularity of it and the culture that fosters, and that it's the leader himself doing it and not others doing it on his behalf.
Yeah, so the authenticity is the really important thing there then.
You can't like an email to show you're acknowledging it. You can like anything on Yammer, and it sounds silly, but that is like a really powerful tool that just shows, hey, I read that. And people don't really consider that when they're looking at a social enterprise network. There's also a responsibility on Jeff and I to do our part to educate our colleagues on what are best practices using the communities, and to show them that there's nothing to worry about. I know there's probably concerned about, well, is he going to get a bunch of emails if he writes a post in Yammer and everyone starts replying? And well, we can make sure that doesn't happen and help them with that. Is somebody going to say something inappropriate or that they shouldn't? What if there's criticism of something that is said? And we'll have to help them work through those concerns and let them know, hey, it's going to work. It's a win-win situation if we approach it right.
Jeff, one thing that you said earlier that was really interesting. So you said that the CEO will send these emails out, but then actually people start a conversation about those onto Yammer. That's quite interesting.
Well, it is. We have a history for 10 years. That's been where you go to talk about things. Some have responded to those emails to the CEO directly. Some have responded to the emails which come from a corporate communications mailbox, back to that mailbox, and that information has been passed along, but nobody's benefiting from seeing those individual responses. It needs to be out there where all see. And the fears, like Nick was, mentioning, we have a long history, out of thousands of groups over time and 120,000 members over time and 3 million plus messages over time. We know that those fears just really don't come to pass that people had. They're the same kinds of fears people had, for starting an enterprise social network in the first place. Ooh, what if people post bad stuff? And what if people post wrong information or get nasty or whatnot? But the times of those things happening are so rare compared to the frequency of everything else that's happening that you just deal with those as needed when they happen, and certainly don't use the fear of those things to stop you from all the good that can happen.
Yeah. And so, Jeff, I guess once you got the CEO, and you said there's quite a few senior leaders that are really active on Yammer already, which is great. But even when it comes from the absolute top, from the CEO, I guess when he starts to be posting on Yammer, it almost gives a permission for everybody else to be there as well.
Absolutely. And that is our experience when it came to like leader town halls and using our internal network as the mechanism for questions and answers. We had a few leaders that did that in the early days of that capability, but as soon as the CEO started using the network for his Q&A portion of those quarterly leader town halls, then magically other leaders suddenly started wanting to do that as well. So it's rare that we have a single day, any week, without one of those happening somewhere in the enterprise. So they're accustomed to that for the dated, timed experiences. Now we just need to shuffle a little bit of it over into the informal day-to-day conversations.
Do you sometimes find, though, with all these conversations that are happening on Yammer, which you call buzz, do the leaders sometimes jump into these conversations with comments? Are they listening to what's going on in the organization?
Yes, and again, I'll point to our chief nursing officer as the prime example of that. I was looking at her stats last week for this meeting I was having about the proposal for the CEO, and in the last 3-month report I was looking at in SWOOP, she had personally commented 900 something times in 3 months.
She's phenomenal.
She is absolutely phenomenal. All kinds of posts and likes and whatnot, and replies, and it's just, she's incredibly affirming of her people, and she uses buzz to do that.
So you've had some sort of enterprise social network up for 10 years, and Yammer came in as part of the Microsoft 365 suite in summer last year. And then you've moved to Teams. So do you have questions of people asking, when do you use Teams and when do you use Yammer, or do you have a defined purpose for each?
We have used Microsoft's graphic on core, inner loop, outer loop, external a lot to help explain that. And so we just repeat ourselves frequently in that regard, saying, if you're dealing with a project team or your day-to-day work team of a small group of people, we want all that stuff in Teams. If it's an enterprise-wide conversation potentially, then it needs to be on Buzz instead. We probably have a few communities of practice in Teams that ought to be in Yammer, and because Buzz was the only place for even the smaller private teams for so many years, it will take a while before we get those to move off of Teams. But I keep looking at that SWOOP metric on public versus private content there to measure that, and I'm wanting to see those private groups generally move away from Yammer and establish themselves in Teams. And we're pretty vocal about suggesting that repeatedly to people. And we're seeing that inch up just a little bit more, into 80 or low 80% something of public messages now, whereas it was in the 70s earlier. So I think we're moving in the right direction there. I'd love to share with you too some things that SWOOP is really helping us with in what we're doing here. Well, the benchmarking reports, by the way, are just the most phenomenal metrics-oriented, community metrics-oriented documents I've ever read, both for Yammer and for Teams. And so I just inhale those when they become available. But, we're tracking everything. We have, the key metrics that we are most concerned about. We pay a lot of attention to the personas and the distribution of personas. One of the things that Nick is doing a fantastic job on, we're taking those 10 nudges that exist, and we're picking one a month and downloading the report and sending a targeted email to everybody who has that particular nudge that month. And so the goal is over a 10-month period to basically have a more targeted communication for everyone out of those 65,000 people based on what level they're at. And it's either kudos, you're doing it great, keep up what you're doing, for the way to go kinds of nudges, or it's here's the next step, here's what you may be missing, kind of nudge that we're doing. And so that is really helpful and a key part of our strategy this year to help us reduce the number of observers that we have and get more interactive people there in the community. And then it's also helping us with the distribution to reward the behaviors that contribute to the personas that we want to encourage. In the distribution right now, we're at 27% engagers, and we want that to be at least at the 30 level. So we have an internal mechanism for rewarding people. It's called Wow Bucks. And if people reach that engager level and they go to SWOOP and screenshot that, for a 3-month period, they're an engager level and send it to me, then we give them some of those Wow Bucks, and you can accumulate those and cash them in for various things. So it's helpful in that regard for us to know where we stand and to help us target the right people for engaging and rewarding the engagement that is indicative of where we hope to go as an organization. So I'm a big fan of SWOOP and all that it has to offer, and that's among the first things I do each day, both for SWOOP for Teams and for Yammer, is to go out and look at the various dashboards and see where we're doing and how we're doing, and certainly monthly to track those numbers to make sure we're moving in the right direction. And that's a significant part of my personal goals for the year that I've set up with my director to focus my energies around, is in identifying the key metrics that we care about there and making sure my efforts contribute to improving those.
With the Wow Bucks, you can cash them in. What sorts of things can you cash them in for?
Well, they are credited to our Healthy Rewards program, which is called Go365, and people also earn those from steps and workouts and attending webinars and all kinds of other things. Nick, actually, we stole him from the part of the business that ran that organization and that community for a long time. So, Nick, you want to tackle the question of what all you can cash in the Wow Bucks for?
Yeah, that was my life for quite a while. It was using Buzz that got me the job there and everything. Anywho, this is a long whole story and history that I can go through here. But yeah, the Wow Bucks translate to bucks within the Go365 program. And the one thing that most people generally will redeem them for is Amazon gift cards. However, there are things like Fitbits that are available, movie tickets, Target gift cards, and there's might be, I think, bikes and workout gear is now an item available. It's all shifted a little since I left, but all in all, it's either supposed to be things you need or things related to health and wellness are all available to you. People go absolutely crazy for the opportunity to earn those Wow Bucks for anything in the company. We know that they will. So if we can find a reason to use that option, we will. They'll come to just about any webinar that we hold if we're offering up some Wow Bucks. And yeah, they want the Wow Bucks, but we're hitting them with a lot of information in the meantime. And I know that we've gotten some people to the next level just by explaining a few things of how the Yammer works. And they'll tell us usually, they're like, oh, thanks, that's helpful. I hit Engager today. Thanks for the information. And we're like, all right, that's what we're here to do.
And
So we've
overall,
had a
like,
variety of webinars, from, how to use Yammer to group admin training to SWOOP training. Nick had some on staying connected, during this pandemic with others that he held. And we have just scheduled another series last week of 5 of them coming up in May and June with the new version of Yammer that's coming out and the new features. And so we'll offer the wow bucks, and we know we'll get the people there to tell the story. And part of that, when we're talking about Yammer, is always the SWOOP back end of it, to encourage them to know what persona they are and to follow the nudges and suggestions to advance along the path there.
yeah, I love that. So you guys are really encouraging people to jump onto SWOOP and have a look at their own personal online behaviors at work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the feedback been?
Mostly it's, whoa, I didn't know that this was here, that I could do that.
Yeah.
And they're so enamored with the fact that all of their activity is in one place, and they're like, oh, that's cool. And they love to see where they rank amongst other people, because it's gamification in a way, and they didn't even realize it. But if they can see that, oh, I'm number 7 on the list of influencers in this group, let's get working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. So that really does encourage more engagement and more employee engagement across the whole organization, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Jeff and I have even been a little competitive at times. I'm like, I'm going to catch up to you in the influencer category. And then I did for a while. And then he posted something and then went ahead of me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to go be clever and get some likes and reactions.
Mm-hmm.
And did that make you think, Nick, about what to post?
Yeah. It's all about engagement. I could post a witty comment or a meme or something, and if it doesn't have anything in the post for people to add to, it's not going to get anywhere. And it's kind of what I try to tell people. I'm like, all right, if you're going to go out there and use the community, what type of conversation are you trying to build? Because if you're not trying to build a conversation, should you be posting? That's what you want to be doing. You want to find out an answer or build a conversation in general. There's plenty of other reasons, but those are 2 really great reasons to use the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that helps? I mean, if someone were to go on and they are that sort of person who's just posting without creating conversation, and they go into SWOOP and they see that they're a broadcaster and they're not actually engaging people, is that helpful for them to see their own personal behaviors, Nick?
Yeah, oh, it definitely is. And I think there are plenty of people who never thought about the fact that, hey, maybe I should take 5 minutes every day to just stop and read what other people are writing. And that's very important, because there's so much great information people are missing. And I think that's where we're benefiting as a company, is people are taking a moment and they're stopping and they're reading and learning things that they might not have before they were given this prompt to, react and respond a little more.
Yeah, that's great. So that sounds like you are moving up the maturity model of an enterprise social network. If people are starting by that broadcasting and then actually starting to engage more, you're moving. Are you seeing signs of more knowledge being shared across Yammer that people are tapping into?
Yeah, I think the last 2 months especially have given us a really great opportunity, specifically the work at home information. You see all kinds of resources being shared, as well as troubleshooting, because there's a lot of technical components to someone working at home. I'm just astounded by how quickly people are getting help, because information's being presented to them, or it'll be information that was shared a month ago that someone will tag someone in the comments and say, hey, I think this is what you were looking for. So it's just super phenomenal to see how much more information is being shared, maybe because of necessity, but it's only going to build from here. People are going to remember how helpful it was.
Well, there's your business value, Nick, isn't it? If people are getting those answers much quicker than they would have if you were going through formal communication lines.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and in this O365 rollout, for example, most of the products, unless there really is a technical installation kind of issue, they're all to be community supported. And so each of those O365 products has its own group in Yammer, and people are being told as things roll out, this is where you go to get help, for the how-to kinds of questions. And so they're taking off, and we have a long history of that with SharePoint and other products anyway, through the years being community supported. With so many new tools out and people having questions about them, then it's driving those kinds of questions to buzz as well.
Well, Nick and Jeff, thank you so much for sharing all your story with me and all your experiences with me. I really appreciate it, and I really look forward to following up with this to see how you get your CEO on, in a year's time. Is he going to be, your top influencer on
Right.
Yammer, the most influential person on Yammer?
Yeah.
So I'd love to follow up with that. Yeah.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed the
Thank you.
conversation.